We'll call the meeting back to order, and we'll start with agenda item number 27, 2016 fire-related emergency antlerless deer hunts for portions of units 067 and 068. Game Division Administrator Brian Wakeling and Eastern Region Game Division Supervisor Tom Donham for possible action. The department will brief the commission on the effects of the hot pot fire in portions of unit 067 and 068 north of Battle Mountain and provide a description of conditions on critical mule deer winter range in the area. The department plans to use antlerless deer hunts during the fall 2016 to reduce deer abundance and subsequent deer mortality on the winter range and lessen the potential impacts to the remaining habitat. The commission may vote to support the department's action. Mr. Wakeling.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission. I'm Brian Wakeling, the Game Division Administrator. What we want to share with you today is our plans for what we plan to implement. The emergency season has already been authorized by the commission. It was authorized during the season setting, quota setting seasons. The eligibility was already authorized by the commission. However, in so doing, we wanted to ensure that the CABs had an opportunity to see this recommendation, and we wanted to ensure that the commission was supportive of it prior to us moving forward. In so doing, I wanted to introduce Tom Donham, our Eastern Region Supervising Game Biologist. He's got some details that he wants to go through and share with you our rationale for the need and for the recommendation overall. So Tom, I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, Brian. Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission. As Brian said, this agenda item is regarding our emergency doe hunt we're recommending or proposing in Area 6, but I thought in addition to that, I don't think everyone's probably as familiar with Area 6 as others, including some of the commissioners, so I thought maybe given some background information, maybe a little short history on the Area 6 deer herd, in addition to what our plans are for the emergency hunt might be valuable. So we put together a little PowerPoint here, and maybe I can muddle my way through it. So we've got a short history of the Area 6 deer herd and then our rationale for the antlerless harvest. Management Area 6 lies predominantly in western Elko County. It does bleed down into northern Eureka and northern Lander County a little bit, and just over into Humboldt County in one spot there. The last time that areas 6, 7, and 10 were all flown in the fall, and those are three of our largest deer herds in the state, was in 2012, and this is some of our data. The statewide fawn ratio that year was 59 fawns per 100 does. Area 10 had observed ratios of 56 fawns. Area 7, 54 fawns, and Area 6 had 74 fawns per 100 does that same year under similar conditions. Here's another example. Here's a 5-year average from 2011 to 2015, comparing Area 6 at 71 fawns per 100 does to the statewide average of 54 fawns per 100 does. And that's pretty normal. Area 6 is about the most productive mule deer herd we've got in the state. And that speaks to why this herd is able, in situations like we have this year, once things do start to recover, it has the ability to rebound rather well and rather quickly. Here's a little closer up of a view of Area 6. The green polygons represent crucial mule deer winter range that's been identified in Area 6. There's over 422,000 acres of crucial winter range that we've identified in the area. This next one is a little, well, this one's not so depressing. This just shows the major movements of the largest portions of that mule deer herd coming out of the Independence and Bull Run Mountains, and kind of where those major movements are to winter range. This one's a little more depressing. the legend at the bottom of this picture says 1900 to 2015 fires. Really what this is representing is more fires that have occurred since the 60s until 2015. It kind of shows that fire's not a new thing in Area 6, and Area 6 has really been impacted by wildfires for a long time. Over 90% of the crucial winter range in Area 6 has been impacted at one time or another. The 3 areas that are circled there represent the 3 largest remaining intact winter ranges that were in Area 6 as of early 2016. And this red polygon shows the hot pot fire, which I talked to the commission about at the last meeting. It burned over July 4th, burned over 122,000 acres of the Eisenhood Range and Eisenhood Basin, which was the largest remaining intact Wyoming sage area in the Eisenhood Range. The circle below that polygon shows another portion of the Eisenhood Range, kind of connects the Eisenhoods to the Sheep Creeks, and it was an intact Wyoming sage covered area that connects the Eisenhoods to the Sheep Creeks. And as of early 2016, that was intact till August 18th. And this has happened since I spoke to you at the last commission meeting. That area, most of it was consumed by a 6,600 acre fire called the Eisenhood Fire. We were counting on that area, hoping that it would provide some relief to some of the mule deer that wintered in the Eisenhood Basin area, because it already supported some wintering deer. It was in pretty close proximity to the Rooster's Comb, which was unburned, but now we've lost that option, unfortunately. This graph we threw in here. The yellow bars are buck harvest, long-term buck harvest. The lighter colored bars represent doe harvest. The primary reason for this slide is just to show this, number one, the stochastic nature of the Area 6 deer herd and the boom and bust cycle that deer herd has experienced, long term. That buck harvest kind of mirrors overall population trends. Right now we're about where we were in the late 70s as far as mule deer numbers. The light colored bars there represent doe harvest and kind of shows that this isn't a new thing. We've been harvesting does in Area 6 for a long time. And there's times after large fires where we have reacted and increased doe harvest to try to keep that herd within carrying capacity of the seasonal ranges and primarily winter range. Hopefully, we've been managing that herd at about 10,000 animals, which we feel like was keeping them within the carrying capacity of the compromised winter ranges overall. With a little luck from Mother Nature in the form of moisture and good timing this winter and this next spring, odds are we'll be able to continue to manage that herd around 10,000 animals as that Eisenhood winter range recovers. It's going to take a few years, but I think we can probably maintain something close to that as long as Mother Nature cooperates. And if we get real lucky and conditions improve, and with continued habitat improvements, we might be able to increase that level of that herd eventually. This is one of the reasons for those high fawn ratios. This is pretty typical summer habitat in Area 6. The productivity of the summer range, along with the aggressive rehab that's been going on and the habitat projects that we've been doing in Area 6, is a big part of the reason that we've been able to keep that deer herd as high as it is and as productive as it is, even in the face of a lot of these fires and degradation of winter range. The summer habitat is so productive that they really crank out the fawns, and as those winter ranges recover, we have an opportunity for those deer herds to respond. Unfortunately, winter range, little different story. A lot of the southern winter ranges in Area 6 along the I-80 corridor are just choked with exotic annuals, cheatgrass, halogeton, just a number of things. That on top of the fact that a lot of those low elevation winter ranges don't get a lot of moisture, comparatively speaking, just exacerbates that whole thing. And to date, about, well, over 45,000 acres of kochia have been seeded on crucial winter range in Area 6. I know some of you aren't real familiar with kochia, so I thought I'd throw this in as well. Why kochia? Kochia provides more of an immediate forage base for wildlife. It competes comparatively well with cheatgrass, sagebrush, and other natives. On this slide it says, 1 in 4 years, those plantings will be successful. It also takes a lot longer for those plantings to recover. Sagebrush can take over a decade to recover. Kochia allows us to go in and provide some relief, some forage more immediately than some of those natives. This is just a slide showing what that kochia looks like in 2003, 2004. We saw 25 to 30% use of kochia on winter ranges, and just kind of shows how those deer were relying on it, how important it is as a forage species. Also kind of shows the short stature of it, and we'll get into that here in a minute. This is the east side of the Sheep Creeks with only about 6 inches of snow on it. While these rehabbed winter ranges allow us to maintain these deer herds under close to normal or below average winters, because of the forage they provide, normal to severe winters are really where those deer take it hard, because what they're lacking is thermal cover. Some of these plantings we have forage out there, but in those very cold, tough winters, it's thermal cover that really stresses those deer. And you can see here the obvious lack of cover. Another picture here, this is Bob's Flat looking towards the Dunphy Hills, the same winter, only about 6 inches of snow. Those dark islands out in the distance are some of the few remaining small islands of sagebrush in that area. So even with only 6 inches of snow, it's pretty much a moonscape out there, unless you have some sagebrush or something a little more structure than the forage or the forage kochia. In addition to the fire rehab we do, typically the winter following a fire, thousands of sagebrush seedlings have also been planted in some of the migration corridors, transition ranges, and on winter ranges, simply to improve habitat, not necessarily in reacting to a fire. This is a picture of the Middle Rock Creek sagebrush seedling planting. It was done back in 2012. This is a picture this spring, and it shows how these seedlings are responded. They've persisted through 4 years of drought, and they're actually now starting to seed themselves and expand, in the middle of a large kochia planting there. So we are seeing some successes. It's not all bad news, I guess, is what we're trying to get across there. More bad news. In 2001, 2002, on these winter ranges on the southern portion of Area 6, we saw about 60 to 70% fawn loss and an estimated 25 to 30% adult mule deer loss, which resulted in a 30 to 40% decrease in the Area 6 herd overall. In 2006, in response to some large wildfires and compromised winter range, we instituted an emergency doe hunt. That year we issued over 1,100 tags and harvested over 600 deer prior to that winter. We did observe a 50% fawn loss during that winter, but the adult mortality was significantly lower than what we saw during the winter of 92, 93, and the winter of 2001, 2002. And we're confident that had a lot to do with the reduction of the total deer numbers on those compromised winter ranges. And then that, in concert with the aggressive fire rehab that we did, allowed that Area 6 herd to respond and get back to population objective of 10,000 by 2015 due to the productivity of that summer range that I was talking about earlier. So Area 6 deer herd has a mule deer management plan. In a nutshell here, it's our intention to maintain that deer within the confines of the winter range carrying capacity, and that's been at about 10,000 deer for the last several years. And we do that through a combination of buck harvest and antlerless harvest. We've been continuing those doe hunts just to keep that herd down around 10,000. So hunting does, like we saw from that graph, is nothing new in Area 6. We've also committed to continuing aggressive rehab. We're promoting fire suppression and doing what we can to encourage proper livestock grazing in order to maintain some of the gains we've made in the past, some of those plantings and habitat projects. We want to keep those in good shape and have them there for the mule deer. This is kind of showing, again, the boom and bust cycle of that Area 6 deer herd. And if you look at the last few years there, what our intention was to maintain that herd at around 10,000 animals through doe harvest and try to keep it within carrying capacity. And I think we've done a pretty good job in the winter 2013-14, and then again this last winter, which were pretty tough winters. A lot of the surrounding areas saw pretty elevated adult deer mortalities. Area 6 didn't realize those same elevated adult mortality rates, and I think that speaks a lot to the fact that we've been keeping that herd below the carrying capacity of those winter ranges. Here's a nice picture of the hot pot fire that we're talking about. And like I said last time at the last commission meeting, this winter range winters about 40% of the Area 6 mule deer herd. About 4,000 deer rely on this winter range. Again, details about the fire. There's only about 14 square miles around the Rooster's Comb area, and now we can't consider the area further south, which we'd been hoping to rely on because of that last fire. And what's left on the ground out there is just far too small to support the estimated 4,000 deer that may show up on that winter range. This is more of the department's recommendations now. Here is what we're recommending at the moment is 2 14-day hunts. Well, we are recommending it, not at the moment. That's what we're going with. 2 14-day hunts with 500 antlerless tags each. Those hunts are going to be from November 21st to December 4th will be the first hunt. And the second hunt is December 5th to the 18th. The reason that we set those dates was so we could avoid the late Area 6 buck hunt. There's people that wait a long time for that tag. It's a pretty special tag. We think we can get done what we need to get done without impacting those guys. Probably an even bigger conflict would be the late rifle bull elk hunt because of the units that we're planning on hunting with these doe tags. More of the bull hunters would be focused on those same units than maybe some of the late deer hunters would be. So we're trying to avoid those hunts as well as we can. This shows the hunt area, and it's not only just the timing of this that we were looking at. The deer are going to be coming out of the Independence Range and Bull Runs into the North Tuscaroras, which is unit 067 there, as they transition towards that Eisenhood winter range. If we have a mild winter, hopefully a lot of them will stay in that transition range. The more severe winter we have, the more deer are going to pile into that Eisenhood country. But we've designed the timing and the geographic area of this hunt in order to target the specific portion of that herd that's actually using or usually uses that winter range in the Eisenhoods. We're not We're not taking deer out of Area 6 that may be used in some other places. We're specifically targeting those deer relying on the Eisenhoods. That hunt area is going to include all of Unit 067 and a small portion, that portion of 068, incorporating the Santa Rania Mountains. It's going to be bounded on the west by the Rock Creek drainage, south from where that Rock Creek passes under the Midas Tuscarora Road to where Rock Creek passes over the Antelope Creek Road, and then the Antelope Creek Road east to the intersection of the Soldier Creek Road, and Soldier Creek Road north to the intersection of the Midas Tuscarora Road, which is a mouthful. But basically the reason we drew the line there and that portion of 068 we thought was important is that Santa Rania Mountains is another area where those deer stage prior to moving into that compromised winter range in the Eisenhoods. We felt like it was important for hunters to be able to access that area, but we didn't necessarily want them going into the burned area itself. For a couple reasons. Once deer got in there, we thought we don't need to be chasing them. They're already stressed out. We can leave them alone. There's also, people tend to look at a burned area, you know, and just on the surface they think, well, it's all burned up, so there's no reason I can't drive all over it. And we wanted to keep the vehicles and the ATVs off the burned area because we will have some active rehab efforts going on in there, and we don't want that to be compromised by people just assuming since it's burned it's okay to drive across. So that's the reasoning for that hunt area the way it is. This is an awful noisy image here. This is just kind of showing that the BLM has already got an emergency stabilization and rehabilitation plan in place. We've been working actively with the BLM to get this stuff done, and everything's moving ahead really well. This kochia here, we were talking about thermal cover, or I was. You guys were, I'm sure, paying close attention while I babbled. But this new cultivar of kochia was approved for use on public land in 2012. We actually have first dibs on 3 different crops of this kochia this year, over 5,000 pounds of seed that we're going to use on this fire. And not only is this kochia, compared to the previous types of kochia we've been using, it's more palatable, more easily digestible, has higher protein content, but it's also bigger. It has a taller, more robust structure, and we're hoping that that will help with the thermal cover issue. It's not only going to provide some forage, this should actually also provide a little better cover for the deer. So the bottom line here is we're going to be issuing 1,000 doe tags for the emergency hunt, and it's not going to eliminate the risk of deer starving on the winter range, particularly fawns. Mother Nature is going to be in control of a lot of that. The worse the winter is, the worse the mortality is going to be. Eligibility right now, the only ones eligible to put in for these tags will be people that don't already hold a deer tag in Nevada. Hopefully by harvesting around 500 does, we'll reduce competition on the limited amount of remaining winter range, which should allow the adult deer that survive to be in better body condition. And that's important because as that Eisenhood winter range recovers, those adult deer, by being in better condition, will be more productive, and that herd will be able to respond better and rebound from this by cranking those fawns out. And again, unfortunately, this isn't going to be a one and done thing. We'll need to keep this portion of the Area 6 deer herd below that carrying capacity of the winter range as that Eisenhood winter range recovers. So we'll probably be looking at elevated doe harvest in those units moving forward until that winter range begins to recover, and then we can back off and hopefully let them respond and get back to where we were. So it's our recommendation that the commission vote to support the department's plan to issue 1,000 antlerless tags in 2 hunts, 500 tags each during late fall, early winter 2016, to reduce the number of mule deer wintering on a habitat severely compromised by the Hot Pot and Eisenhood fires. So with that, the Area 6 biologist sitting here, but I can try to field any questions you all have, and if I don't know the answer, I'll get a hold of him for you by the sometime.
Thank you, Tom. I just had a quick question. You were talking about approximately 4,000 deer that you would expect to move into that Rooster's Comb area. What do you expect that it would be able to support in current condition?
That has everything to do with the severity of the winter. And I, there's no way to anticipate that. If it's a real mild winter, below average winter, a lot of those deer may not even show up on that Eisenhood winter range. They may stay in that transition range in the Santorini Mountains, North Tuscaroras. But as the winter conditions get worse, more and more animals are going to be forced into that area that's been burned. And there is forage there. Some of that kochia has resprouted since the fire. And I think a bigger problem is the lack of thermal cover, not to mention the fact that even with the resprouting, there's just not enough forage to support all those deer. And the young are the ones that are going to suffer the most.
Commissioner Drew.
Yeah, I just want to start out by saying I really appreciate this presentation for a couple of reasons. I think, and I can't remember off the top of my head, but the department probably has the authority to implement one of these emergency hunts without even coming to us. And you sure would have been well within your rights to do so, but I think this gives an opportunity for all of us to better understand what is a critical and dire situation. But I know what the sportsman and the public reaction is going to be when they see 1,000 tags. In fact, I've already got some of it. The phone calls, oh my God, 1,000 tags. What's going on? Is there a precedent? Do we know what's going to happen? And obviously, I think you've hit it in your presentation. There's a lot of uncertainty. But yeah, we've learned lessons in the past from Area 6. And so not only do I appreciate the presentation, if I would have had that PowerPoint, I would have sent it to every cab in the state because there's a lot of information in there. And I know Mr. Vasey, who stood up just on cue, and his staff is probably going to put out some sort of press release announcing that these tags are available. And I'm not saying this to be funny, I'm saying this to be serious. I would post that video on the press release when people start asking, why are you doing this? Because we have learned those lessons. We need to use this as kind of an informative opportunity to let folks know the severity of the situation and what's going on. So kudos to the department, Tom, to you and your staff for putting this all together. I really appreciate it personally. I think we should get as much value out of this as we can because it is a tough situation to deal with. But I also think it's an educational opportunity. So I guess the only question that I would have for you is last time when you gave us the update, there was some uncertainty as to not how serious, but what sort of priority the BLM would be giving this area because it wasn't necessarily high priority sagebrush or sage grouse areas or in SFAs. It looks like they've given it a pretty high priority, but is there anything this board needs to do to help push forward restoration efforts?
It has become a priority for the BLM. Again, their main priority is going to be some of the sage grouse habitat, the priority sage grouse habitat. But we have been working with them and impressing upon them the critical nature of the mule deer habitat in there. And we do actually have a large sum of money now that has been approved for doing a lot of this. Over $5 million has been ear tagged to do this. We're also getting some other donations, smaller donations from various groups, wanting to buy seed and the word's out there. And so we're getting a lot of money for this, and I think BLM is on board. But still, their priority will be sage grouse habitat, and rightfully so. But they're aware of it. And I think anything any group can do and the commission can do is just, again, impress upon Elko BLM how important this area is and the mule deer resource and everything else in that area. So anything that people can do, write letters and just let them know that the sportsmen of the state and anybody who's into mule deer can send those letters and tell them that it is a priority for Nevada, for sure.
Appreciate
Thank you, Tom. Any questions? Commissioner McNinch?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Not any questions, but I echo a lot of the same comments that Commissioner Drew threw out there. Tony, wasn't your mule deer bulletin, didn't it have a picture of Area 6 deer that had basically bedded down? And I don't know how many deer were in that picture, but they basically laid down and starved to death. And it's a tough picture it was tough to see that. And that's what happens when these things happen in nature. So I appreciate you bringing it forward. And it's tough to see, but to me, it's an easy decision. There's only one thing that you can do and to maintain a healthy herd, and it's something that that just has to be done sometimes. So I appreciate it.
Further commission comments or questions? Commissioner Hubbs?
I just had a couple questions. That when we say it's antlerless hunt, that means that just does, right? It says doe and brackets next to it.
Does and fawns. But yes, we're targeting does. And, you know, of course, who knows, there may be a weird buck out there that never got antlers. But yeah, we're targeting the female portion of the herd. And the reasoning behind that is when we're trying to control numbers, the does are the ones that are having fawns. The does, the female segments of those populations is how you control population levels. And if we were giving out buck tags, they would turn into trophy buck tags, and we wouldn't be getting the deer harvest we needed because people would be selective and wanting to shoot a nice buck and, you know, some other issues. So we control populations by female harvest.
And this may be silly, but I'm going to just ask, and you don't foresee having any problems fulfilling that quota at that time? And then just lastly, the kochia that you were talking about, is that native or is that something that's brought in?
That is a non-native. And it's used because it competes better with cheatgrass and some of these non-native weeds and annuals that are impacting the ranges better than our native plants do. So it's something we need to do. It's the best choice that's out there. If we had a native species that had the same properties that could outcompete those exotic annuals and that could provide forage that quickly, we'd use it. But right now, that non-native kochia is our best option.
Is it in any way competitive towards sagebrush coming in later?
No, actually, and that was one reason, that's a good question, that I showed that slide of the sagebrush seedlings that were planted in 2012 in the middle of that kochia seeding, and that they've persisted there even through drought, and the kochia hasn't out-competed them, and they're actually seeding themselves now and expanding in that kochia seeding. And it's also a little more of a fire-resistant species than sagebrush, so it acts almost like a green strip we talked about last time, and helps, you know, maybe limit some of the damage fires can do.
Further commission comments? Thank you, Tom. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
This is an action item. We'll take it out for public comment, and we'll start in Elko.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, Jim Cooney, Elko Cab. The cab voted to support this emergency hunt. Along the lines of what Commissioner Drew just mentioned, Matt Jeffers, biologist for Area 6, made this presentation during our CAP meeting. I'm pretty sure after seeing that, that was what persuaded the majority of the members to go along with this hunt. They went through and they did an excellent job. So I think that idea of having that on the link with the press release is a good one. Thank you.
Thank you. Further public comment on Elko?
No further comment, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Public comment in Reno.
This is our place to speak. Okay, thank you. Karen Boger, Nevada chapter of Backcountry Hunters and Anglers. Thank you for this really interesting presentation on ice fire in Area 6, and I applaud the NDOW's decision related to the doe hunt. I think it was the difficult but right thing to do. But the presentation brought up some questions that I'm familiar with its benefits of being so competitive, resilience, and nutrition-wise. But I question, is it being used as a nurse crop, are you reseeding with a certain percentage of natives within that, or in subsequent years after it gets established? I would think that that would be a very important thing to do. Also, I'm glad to hear that there has been will be adaptive management of cattle, and I hope that means at least a 2-year period of rest in those areas. But there was no mention of feral horses, and I'm curious as to what the numbers are in that area at this current time. It seems to me that it would be incumbent upon BLM to have a policy when these fires happen, particularly in winter range and habitat that's very important to wildlife, that there would be a mandatory roundup of horses, not only to AML, but to the lowest AML. So that's my comments and questions. Oh, and I would hope maybe the commission might write a letter to BLM commending them, but also maybe asking those same questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen. Further public comment in Reno?
No more comment in Reno, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Comment in Las Vegas?
Chairman and Commissioners, Chad Foster, Douglas County CAB. Just a couple of quick points. One, Tom, I think that was a very good presentation. I know that we didn't have the opportunity at our last CAB meeting to see that. We fully support this. This presentation does bring up a couple of interesting questions, though. I want to echo in Commissioner Hubbs's observation that I'm wondering if we're going to get 1,000 hunters to apply for these tags, and I'm wondering if in this situation a double doe tag might be more beneficial with just 1 2-week hunting period. That way you have half